Hello, welcome to Philosophy Roulette. Time appropriate greetings to wherever it is you are in the world. Philosophy Roulette is where we go online, we get a philosophy paper, which we don't know what it is, read and review it live for your viewing pleasure. You could even be here live and join me in the chat and ask questions and stuff about what is going on, and I will try to answer it. I don't know if I do a good job, but I will find out because it's the first time I'm reading it too. You can also suggest things. I suggest you do that. And, send me something to read, and that way you can laugh at me when I mess up. Or steal my opinions for your philosophy paper, which I suppose actually might happen. I did have someone once request a paper, and it turned out I had already done that paper. I was like, I wonder why they want this. But yeah. So let's see. I'm going to grab something from a journal I haven't done in a while. Ergo's open access. I don't think I've done anything. I was thinking about the Journal of the American Philosophical Association earlier today, too, for some reason. And let's see if... I think they publish longer things, but... let's find out if they have anything of reasonable length. Alright, let's see if we can get the forthcoming stuff. So we got one on this page, which is cool because it looks like it's available, having 170 something downloads. And this one has debunking logical ground, so that's cool. So we've got follow the way of heaven, exemplarism, emulation, and Daoism versus debunking logical ground, distinguishing metaphysics from semantics. And this one is 15 pages forthcoming, and this is 15 pages not forthcoming. Actually, well, they're both very recent. This is 2020, and this is forthcoming. So, one's from a few weeks ago, and one's not. Let's go with the Daoism, because we can do this one later, maybe. So, here's what we're going to do. If you are live in the chat, you can grab the, whenever you show up, you can grab the link to this page where you can get the paper by typing !paper in the chat, and this link will pop right back up. Also, if you are watching this later, the link is in the show notes below the video. So, save file. Okie dokie. There we go. Let's see if we can... Let's see, can I zoom in a little bit more, maybe? Don't know if it's worth it. Okay. Okie dokie. There we go. Okay, no abstract. Excellent. So we're reading Following the Way of Heaven, Exemplarism, Emulation, and Daoism. And it's, 31 pages, but double-spaced, so that's okay. So, maybe be a little over an hour. Yeah, okay. Exemplars and Emulation. Central to many of the world's ancient philosophical traditions are exemplars, persons who exemplify a life characterized by aspiration to or attainment of a set of moral or spiritual goods. Such exemplars fall into broad types, including moral heroes, spiritual teachers, and philosophical sages who function within their respective communities as living symbols to inspire and guide others in the pursuit of a good life. Within recent years, exemplarism, as it may be called, has been most fully explored by Linda Zagzebski, In the Exemplarist Moral Theory, she develops an account of moral formation built on encounters with exemplars. Such encounters with exemplars provide the material and motivation for developing oneself into a morally or spiritually admirable, flourishing person. A main concept in Zagzebski's account of the exemplarist process of moral formation is emulation, a form of imitation in which the emulated person is perceived as a model in some respects. To emulate X is to take X as model for oneself through active imitation of some or all of X's qualities or characteristics as a way of acquiring them for oneself. A person may be an exemplar of virtue, a role, or a way of life, providing practical guidance and, in some cases, theoretical instruction, too. Within the ancient Greek tradition, exemplars often articulated philosophical visions of the good life to lend depth and cogency to certain ways of acting, a theme of Pierre Hadot's classic study, philosophy as a way of life. But exemplarism is also evident in ancient Indian and Chinese cultures too, where yogis, gurus, sages, and other persons act as incountable objects of imitation. The exemplars of the Buddhist tradition, for instance, include monastics, lamas, enlightened bodhisattvas, and Zen masters. There are two lacunae in Zagzebski's account which become evident once we look into other moral and spiritual traditions, Eastern and Western, that include exemplars. First, there is not a set of detailed accounts of the character and comportment of the exemplars, descriptions of their attitudes, behavior, demeanor, gestures, moods, ways of speaking, and their general way of life, as Amy Olberding documents in the case of Kongzi as depicted in the Lun Yu. Crucially, this must include depictions of the difficulties, frustrations, and pains the exemplars encounter and respond to in their efforts to achieve or maintain exemplarity. Second, a set of emulative practices that aspirants ought to follow in their efforts to model themselves on their respective exemplars, without which the aspiration to emulation would be idle. After all, emulation can take general forms such as habitation and observation, but also specific forms in particular traditions. Buddhist monastics, for instance, have a practical scrutinizing of the comportment of, not even going to try and read that, roughly morally beautiful friends, involving circumambulating them, scrutinizing the details of their voice and manner, and committing these to memory. Consulting other traditions that include exemplars also indicates another feature of Zagzebski's exemplarism that involves attention. All the exemplars she mentions are human persons, whether historical and contemporary figures such as Kongzi, Jean Venier, or legendary or fictional characters. Such figures are deeply impressive human beings for sure, although exemplarism should also recognize the wider array of more quotidian exemplars, those less... come on, computer, don't break on me now. Those less famous but no less admirable or outstanding, the wise friend, generous colleague, or selfless caregiver. The focus, we got the the humble nurse nowadays in COVID ravaged America. And the rest of the world for that matter, the doctors and healthcare workers. The focus on the human exemplars makes sense too, insofar as it naturally fits Zagzebski's focus on interpersonal emulation, on admiration as the primary form of emotional response to exemplars, and on the process of moral education, for instance, between children and adults. Indeed, some may wonder what other models of virtue there could be, other than human beings whose life or conduct invites admiration and sustains emulation. Without denying the centrality of human exemplars as concrete models of virtue and excellences, there is a further possibility that something other than a person could function as a model of virtues or excellences, and of a mode of emulation whose ultimate object is non-personal. So could I emulate my beer? Might be interesting. In certain spiritual traditions, we find a range of objects of emulation, including both human persons and non-human objects, the latter identified as the ground or source of reality of the world as experienced. Borrowing from a favorite term of the Stoics, this can be called a cosmic mode of emulation. Okay. In its general form, an aspirant emulates the ground or source of the world, whose excellent qualities or features, when embodied by a human being, manifest as virtues, day, or other forms of excellence. I don't know what that day is doing there. I'm not sure. It might be Latin or something. In this case, certain of the virtues are an exemplar are therefore emulations of features or qualities of the cosmos of whatever is understood within the terms of those traditions as the fundamental nature or source of the world. Okay, so you can emulate some higher sort of thing that's going on in the universe. The aim of this paper is to establish the existence of this cosmic mode of emulation by demonstrating its presence and importance in the form of Daoism expressed in the Book of Zhuangzi, whose first 7 inner chapters are attributed to Zhuangzi. The other 25 chapters are works of multiple authors and are responses to and receptions of the main text, offering commentary and developing themes. There are also cosmically emulative themes in other texts associated with early Daoism, the Daoism, the classic way of its power or virtue, attributed to a legendary figure Lao Tzu, and dating to at least the 4th century BCE. Despite their shared themes and concerns, though, these two texts differ substantially, only being classified together as Taoist, not a term used or recognized at the time by later scholars. I therefore focus on Zhuangist Taoism, with only occasional references as when appropriate to the Daoism. Studying forms of cosmic emulation across exemplars traditions can involve a set of different strategies because these forms will differ in their conceptions of exemplarity, virtue, and the relation of these to the ground or source of the world. An important strategy is what one might call the parallelist strategy of identifying and exploring parallels between the virtues of an exemplar and the qualities of the cosmos. One's too striking to be dismissed as coincidental, especially within traditions including systematic theoretical superstructures. So is this some sort of metaphysics? I don't know what that means, a theoretical superstructure. I mean, this could mean a few things. We'll have to see. My proposal is that a tradition that incorporates a cosmic mode of emulation will contain substantial parallels between the admirable qualities of the exemplar and the excellent or characteristic qualities of the ground or source of the world. Such parallels occur because the exemplar succeeds at emulating those qualities, manifesting as virtues or excellences, typically by engaging in a set of emulative practices, certain ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that enable them to emulate the way of the world, as Taoists might put it. If so, the existence of these types of exemplarity show that there are forms of exemplarism where the object of emulation is not in any way a person. Alright, so, I mean, there has to be some sort of correspondence between a person and the universe, and the claim was already hinted at that there is going to be some sort of parallel that cannot be like ad hoc or ignored. So we're going to see how that I mean, I don't really know what I have in concert with the cosmos on any general scale, so we'll have to see. Daoism and Tao. Exemplarism has deep roots within the ancient Chinese philosophical tradition, which offers a diverse set of objects and practices of emulation. Confucianism enjoins emulation of many different persons, ranging from one's parents and ancestors, the emperor, the ancient sage, kings, and such exemplar types as the consummate person and the sage. Throughout its texts, such as the Lun Yu, there are descriptions of the character and the conduct of such exemplars, emulation of whom is presented as a primary practice of moral and social development. The normative and persuasive significance of these figures are best articulated using an exemplar's framework, as demonstrated compellingly by Amy Oberling 2012. Within Confucianism, the main focus is interpersonal emulation of human beings. A single remark in the Lun Yu refers to the way of heaven, one of two subjects on which Kongzi refused to speak, the other being human nature. Later Confucians, in particular Mengzi, went on to develop an ideal of the ruler as the son of heaven, whose mandate to rule derives from displaying what Joshua Brown calls filial devotion to rhymes and patterns of the Tiandao, the way of heaven. But devotion is not emulation. While devotion often entails a transformation of oneself, this need not occur by modeling oneself on the person to whom one is devoted. Similarly, the ideal rulers could, as Julia Ching argues, be exemplary insofar as they mediate between heaven and earth. But such mediation does not require the ruler to emulate heaven, if only because the activity of mediating is often easier when one is significantly different from what one is mediating between. Ain't that the truth? Always easier to deal with when you don't have any emotional connection. Cosmic emulation, therefore, I'm not much like the cosmos, I don't think. I mean, the rest of the world's, I'm like other people, but like the rest of the cosmos is a big place. I'm not that big. Alright, so cosmic emulation, therefore, requires a more intimate form of relationship between the exemplar and the emulated than is captured by concepts such as devotion and mediation. It requires a more substantive process of modeling where the qualities of the emulated state or indicate the virtues or excellences that the emulator ought to possess. The object of the emulation is a model, although not necessarily a total model, complete in every detail. What is being modeled is a general set of qualities and a character, which in the case of Daoism is expressed figuratively in the talk of the Tao as gentle, spontaneous, and non-contending. This intimate sort of cosmic emulation is evident in the Daoism and Zhuangzi, as suggested by David E. Cooper, 2012. Initial problems arise, though, since the central term Tao requires careful handling. The Chinese term Tao has dynamic and nominal forms referring to a way or a course, as well as the activities of following a way or making a path. Within ancient Chinese culture, there were Tao ways for activities from singing and dressing to practicing archery and living one's life, bound up into a certain way of life. Although the Lun Yu refers once to the way of heaven, the term Tao acquired deepened and extended forms within the Tao Te Ching. The way now became the ineffable source of the world that cannot be named, generates the myriad things, and gives them their natures or potentialities. The sage described, albeit sparely and poetically, as what is a model of a way of life that is on the way, figuratively depicted as water, ceaselessly flowing, adapting to what it encounters rather than contending with things, nourishing the creatures of the world and flowing down to the lowest places, thereby evincing virtues such as constancy, gentleness, and humility. By cultivating and exercising these virtues must be day, in their own life, the sage joins with the world. In the Tao Te Ching, we therefore see parallels between the virtues of the sage and the qualities of Tao, consistent with its explicit injunction to human beings to try to emulate or model oneself on Tao, to follow the way of heaven. Unfortunately, Tao Te Ching lacks the dense, detailed descriptions of the character and comportment of its sages, and it does not stipulate a complex set of emulative practices. In itself, this may not be problematic because some aspirants may prefer fairly sparse sketches of what the life of a sage is like to denser, more meticulous exercises in moral portraiture. Especially given the ancient Chinese aesthetic taste for suggestiveness rather than definiteness, still, a need for a detailed practical instruction may trump aesthetic preferences, especially for so different a task as attaining exemplarity. If so, the lack of dense, detailed descriptions of the everyday comportment of sages might disappoint, as will the Tao Te Ching's failure to specify similarly detailed emulative practices, performance in and of which enables aspirants to model themselves the way. To be sure, there are remarks to the effect that a sage abides in the practice of not acting, by acting in a way that is supple, adaptive, unconstrained by artificial imperatives and priorities. An aspirant needing more, however, would have to turn elsewhere, namely to the Zhuangzi. Alright, so this is all set up at the moment. They're just saying, well, we haven't really got what the way is, and I don't think you can, I think it's technically impossible to say what the Tao is. So, how would you emulate something that's technically impossible to do? How would the author here technically say how to emulate something that is undescribable? So, we'll see where we're going with this. The Zhuangzi offers a vivid description of two true or genuine persons, exemplars of lives of the spontaneity, responsiveness, and mindfulness that mark out a person on the way. Some of the best known are the butcher Cook Ding, a bell stand maker, an elderly man swimming in the torrent beneath a waterfall, and a hunchback skilled at catching cicadas, all of whom fathom the real character of life. Such people are quite unlike the subtle, unobtrusive sage kings of the Tao Te Ching, since their activities and lives are ordinary and humble, focused on practical activities, carving, swimming, without any pretension to gain influence, let alone rule the state. Indeed, Zhuangzi openly derides being ambitious and aggressively proactive as a sham virtuosity, since a true person's guiding concern is rectifying himself, not trying to rule anything outside himself. Yeah, very stoic. The question is whether the Zhuangist exemplars are emulating Tao in the sense of using it as a model for the day, virtues, potencies, dispositions that make them exemplary. An initial difficulty is the ineffability of Tao, which is affirmed in the famous opening line of the Tao Te Ching. The true way cannot be spoken of. Yeah, this is all right. To be fair, this is like the limit. I think I might have read this when I was like the Tao Te Ching when I was like 14. This is basically all I can remember of it. That you can't really. All I know of is that it's one of those you can talk about it, but you can't really speak of it. You can sort of talk around it at best. And echoed in Zhuangzi's warning that whatever is said is merely how the course is described, not the course itself. Yeah. Something neatly captured by Alan Watts' translation of that opening line. The course that can be discoursed is not the true course. Although Tao's ineffability is argued for on various grounds, what each ground rules out is the use of literal propositional language, which crucially keeps open various roles for more figurative metaphorical language. Indeed, the Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi extensively employ elusive poetic styles and metaphors that serve to evoke, intimate, or attune one to Tao. Tao is not an entity, object, or God with will, purposes, or desires that can be identified and theorized. It is, as the Zhuangzi puts it, the active wellspring that gives forth the ways of myriad things, not something that causes the world. Tao is formless and therefore not some very striking thing or being, but rather that which forms, and things. These uses of figurative language continues with the Zhuangzi that the way is handed down but not received, apprehended but not seen, above the highest point without being high, prior to heaven and earth without being long-lasting. I'm just sort of wondering what the author is doing in this paragraph. Is just showing how hard it is to outline what's going on. All right. I mean, they're setting us up for something. I just don't know what yet. To better understand the relation of the Zhuangist exemplars to Tao, we should focus on the theme of spontaneity, Ziran literally self-sowness, the primary Taoist virtue, for this is the most important characteristic of Zen-Ren and Tao alike. Edward Slingerland remarks that being fully in harmony with Tao requires living in a way that is completely spontaneous. What that term captures are a set of virtues or dispositions that are qualities of Tao as manifest in human form, preeminently in the conduct and lives of the Zen-Ren. Okay, so we've got some virtues that go along with how to be more in line with the Tao, I guess. Okay, so that's what we get, because we can't say what it is, but we can somehow get themes of what to do. So I don't know how that gets squared really, but I mean, sounds good. Alright, spontaneity. Ziran is typically translated as spontaneity and names a cluster of capacities and dispositions, but is more literally rendered as self-sowness. The mode of spontaneity admired is not that of caprice, passionate impulse, blanking on how to say that word, like capriciousness, passionate impulse, or thoughtless reactiveness, since, as A.C. Graham emphasizes, the Zhuangist exemplars are often acutely concentrated on the task at hand. Cooking, for instance, comes to a halt at gnarled joints of bone, relying not on mere skill, but on the promptings of the spirit, until suddenly the ox lies dismembered at his feet. Suddenly the ox... That's a little scary. Okay. Asked to explain his preternatural skill, the old man, swimming in a pool under the waterfall, too turbulent even for the fish, replies that he had no way but would simply enter with the inflow and emerge with the outflow, to follow the way of the water rather than to try to impose his own way upon it. Spontaneity, in the relevant sense, is a supple responsiveness apt to be spoiled by processing of analyzing possibilities, weighing options, and applying rules. Since spontaneity has a special significance to the Zhuangist exemplars, it offers the best place to look, as it were, for evidence of the cosmic mode of emulation. The Tao Te Ching... Alright, so I'm not sure that this follows, but I mean, it may have special significance, and why would it then therefore be the best place to look for cosmic emulation? I mean, it's a fair strategy, I just don't know if I mean, I think it's a good strategy, not even a fair strategy. I think it's a good strategy. I just don't know if it's actually the best place. The Tao Te Ching explicitly states that the sage, by following the way of the earth, thereby follows the way of the Tao, which follows the way of spontaneity. Okay. So, I mean, there's some sort of transitivity here, I guess, that we're trying to understand, or the author is trying to show. If so, we ought to be able to find in the character and comportment of Zen Ren specific parallels with the way. To do this, we can look for more specific parallels between figuratively rendered attributes of Tao and a set of virtues of spontaneity. So to start with, there are what we might call virtues of impartiality, which emulate Tao, from whose perspective nothing is worthy or unworthy, or otherwise rated as more desirable, valuable, or attractive than any other thing. Without the particular natures and needs of the 10,000 things, there is no basis for such partial evaluations of things. We see such virtues of impartiality in the Zhuangzi. The Zen Ren do not follow any specific course, where that means being partisan to any one course, but they follow the rightness of the way each thing already is without the least bias. A Taoist sage steps back, for instance, from conventional classification of animals into pests or the cute and the cuddly, and instead recognizes the true inborn nature of all these and sees the impartiality of possible and the possibility of living closer to birds and beasts. So there's some sort of a almost Husserlian bracketing of opinion here, going on here, maybe. Where was I? Birds, beasts. Playing on the aquatic metaphors, the Zen Ren follows along with things, emulating the impartiality of water, adapting to rather than contending with them, like the old man who follows the course of the water itself, or the bell stand maker who adapts the inborn heavenly nature of the trees. By bracketing prevailing classifications and judgments and then attending to natural phenomena like water, the Zen Ren emulates the impartiality of Tao. So this is a bracketing of your presuppositions, and you're taking a step back from the moral imposition that we might have on things. Okay. A second cluster of virtues of spontaneity concerns constancy, a set of capacities that emulate the flow and stability of the constant Tao, again characterized aquatically as an ever-flowing river or spring. Such constancy is an attribute of Tao, understood as a stability born of the flow, rhythm, or steadiness of or something, a river, say, not constantly subject to external disruption, pressures, or interference. This is a mode of spontaneity, since it enables a person to engage with the world in ways that are not constantly interrupted or controlled by things outside oneself, such as the directives and imperatives of the social world. Spontaneous things and creatures for Taoists are ones that express their own natures, a term which in classical Chinese is Xing, the course in which life completes its development if sufficiently nourished and not obstructed or injured from outside. Throughout the early text, there are regular references to the constant Tao, as in the opening line of the Tao Te Ching, where the term Tao can itself be translated as course, which connotes something steady, regular, and active, the course of a river, say. In the Zhuangzi, the relevant term, Chang, constant, sustainable, has a specific sense of which is capable of being maintained over a long period of time without exhausting or destroying itself. In this mode of constancy that the Zen Ren emulate in their practice and activity, exemplified by the flowing, unforced, and uncontrived music of the famed Yellow Emperor, by living in ways guided by one's own dispositions rather than being buffeted around by externalities, the sage enables the promptings of the spirit to begin to flow, enabling the sage to follow along with and find his or her place in the flow. I mean, I've done 112 of these, no, 111 technically before this. I am the constant philosopher at the moment. Yeah. Gotta figure out what to do with this project. Anyway, keep reading. That's what I gotta do. A final set of virtues of spontaneity that are modeled on attributes of Tao refer to its nourishing role, this time exploring both the aquatic and maternal metaphors. Recall that Tao is like water in providing nourishment and support for the 10,000 things, a medium in which things come together. Just as water nourishes plants and creatures, Tao sustains the 10,000 things according to their needs and natures. Likewise, the Zhuangist exemplars emulate the nourishing way of Tao by acting in ways attentive to the needs and natures of the things they encounter. They nurture life, try to clear the way for things, and honor the self-sowness of the things that Tao has opened up and arrayed. Gathering these various aquatic images together, as long as sage will take joy in clearing the way for things, alert to the uncontrived inclination of things, alive to the portents of every transformation, and helping things and creatures accomplish their own mandates. When engaging with animals, for instance, a Zen man is sensitive to the needs and natures of different creatures, unlike the ruler who kills a captive bird by giving it rich food and an opulent environment inappropriate to an animal that eats wiggly things and is at home in deep forests. Similarly, a Zen man will avoid treating horses in ways that are insensitive to their true inborn natures of horses to eat grass and gallop across fields, but that render them more valuable relative to human interests, for example, branding, shaving, clipping, briding, and penning them. By cultivating and exercising these three clusters of virtues of spontaneity, Zen men emulate various attributes of Tao as figuratively rendering, using the aquatic and maternal metaphors and other images taken from natural phenomena that aptly symbolize or evoke them. When expressed in human character and conduct, the impartiality, constancy, and nourishing character of Tao manifest as a clear set of virtues which explain how and why a Zen man is taking heaven as their model. The idea that we're getting this from the Tao is fine, but where did the Tao get it? I mean, did the Tao eventually, was this handed down by divine inspiration, the original writing of it? How are we to think of where the Tao came from? Was it the other way around, that people had those virtues at some point, and then that was sort of distilled and distilled into what the Tao became? So, I mean, just because it is attributed to the Tao, that doesn't make it part of the cosmic universe. That may have been part of the people, and then we have put that out into the world. We've anthropomorphized the Tao, or the world, or the cosmos, and called it the Tao. The virtues that we liked in people were anthropomorphized into the cosmos and centered on the Tao. So I'm a little worried. This isn't really a worry about this article. It may just be a more general, we made God in our own image sort of thing. Okay, so forgetting that, the attributes of Tao provide normative criteria that pick out certain virtues or dispositions as attractive and desirable, which certain persons are then disposed to emulate. Some Zen men seem to do this naturally, enjoying an evident natively receptivity to Tao, perhaps as a result of their naturally being on the way, a natural attainment often characterized as daimonic, especially by Kongzi. Other Zen men evidently have to engage in more structured emulative practices, ones that enable them to evince an adaptable, flexible, responsive, uncontrived style of life, for instance by actively nourishing the mandates of things, tending and attending to the creatures they encounter without invidiously imposing their own ways upon them. I don't want to hate on people that just happen to be naturally lucky, but I don't know if that's even the case. Most of these people have to work very hard. Very few people get that are just born saints by nature. It's everyone has to work super hard at stuff. It's usually a bit more myth than fact when people just seem to be perfect. Spontaneity expresses parallels between the virtues of Zhuangist exemplars and the figuratively and metaphorically rendered characteristics of Tao, achieved through emulation of a sort broadly consistent with Zagzebski's description of it as a form of imitation in which the emulated person is perceived as a model in some respect. Tao cannot be a model in every respect because it lacks effective dispositions, but it is still a model for certain virtues, notably of profound virtue. An important difference, however, is that emulation of Tao does not, indeed cannot, involve encounters with that which is the ultimate model. To be sure, Tao is not an abstract theoretical postulate, but something experienced. Apprehended but not seen. You know, people say stuff like this. I mean, it's very hard to have apprehended but not seen and really understand what we're talking about here. It's like, well, we figure it out. It's a concept, okay, but that doesn't mean you can't. May not have the properties that may not have other properties that might give it different, like not make it easier to analyze than it might seem. But at least some people, at least some people, some of the time. By temperament or through self-cultivation, Zenren enjoy a particularly stable, acute sense of Tao that guides their emulative practice. They have an intimation or apprehension of Tao which is amplified by certain experiences, actions, and phenomena. Order notably exemplifies various aspects of Tao in a way clouds or stones do not. Indeed, an important reason why Taoists urge the close attention to the natural world is that it affords better ciphers or symbols of Tao than artificial urban environments. So there is indeed emulation of Tao insofar as it provides the model of virtues of the Zen-Ren without direct interpersonal encounter. So there is this like natural world versus non-natural world, urban environments. I don't know. I mean, this seems like an interesting parallel here that could be talked about. Why is the natural world better in this way? What exactly is it doing? I mean, there's water anywhere you want to put water, but why does the water in the natural world work better than the water in the sink? Something to worry about. A second desideratum of a cosmically emulative tradition is the specification of emulative practices, ways of acting that guide those who aspire to wander in the heavenly, attuned to the way. The Zhuangzi offers at least two, the notion of wandering and fasting of the heart-mind. David E. Cooper, 2018, argues that when wandering and fasting, the Zhuangist sages cultivate and exercise the spontaneity or naturalness that make them an exemplar of the way. When doing so, they develop and display the responsiveness in the interpersonal calm when vision is most lucid. In the words of A.C. Graham, that is the human manifestation of the spontaneity of Tao. I wish I could be more attuned to reading all these words. That would be good. Zhuangzi uses the metaphor of wandering or roaming to describe the Zenren's capacity to transcend their own ways of experiencing and engaging with the world. When wandering, the sage can roam among the ways of other creatures and things, no longer confined to their own parochial schemes of like and dislikes, no longer disposed to run away from, to reactively judge and reject any particular thing. So back to the sort of the Husserlian bracketing, which is very interesting. Throughout the Zhuangzi, this is presented as a precondition for the various attainment of the genuine person who can unify their inborn energies, nourish their vital energies, and merge their virtuosities. By recognizing their own perspectives for what it is, one way among the many given by Tao, the Zhuangist Zen-Ren are able to roam among other beings. A.C. Graham describes the wandering sage as soaring above the restricted viewpoints of the worldly, experiencing the vastness at the root of things, and so arriving up beyond them to the source of things, to Tao. It seems very almost Nietzschean with the reversal of morals. Wandering enables the sage to see through the way things fit together and thereby to emulate the impartiality of Tao, which has no perspective, no schemes of likes or dislikes, and the sage can therefore appreciate that true virtuosity resides in the heavenly, not in the projects and activities of the human world. A second emulative practice described in the Zhuangzi is fasting of the heart-mind, which prepares one for wandering by emptying the mind of the tightly held plans, purposes, and preconceptions. Yeah, so this is the, back to the Husserl. I'm sure someone's looked at this before from that perspective. Since the ancient Chinese did not distinguish the cognitive and affective, Xin heart-mind includes our tendencies to classify and evaluate, to affirm some things as right and some others as wrong, our evaluations and interpretations. Zhuangzi constantly urges us to regard our judgments and orderings as transient conveniences, and alert responsiveness made difficult by our tendencies to rigidity, to forget that the human realm is like the tip of a hair on the body of a horse. The human realm is like the tip of a hair on the body of a horse. Interesting. Okay. I am not quite there yet to understand that one. I mean, transient, sure, but Although a sage still has concerns and makes judgments, of course, since these are constitutive of having a world, a way of experiencing and engaging with a world. The difference is that a Zen-ren is not closed-minded about their concerns or dogmatic about their discriminations. Human ways are not privileged because, from the perspective of Tao, nothing can be worthy or unworthy, and forgetting this leads one to interfere with its allotment of things. The bell stand maker describes his fasting. When I am going to make a bell stand, I dare not let it deplete my vital energy. Rather, I fast to quiet my mind, and after 3 days, I no longer presume to care about praise or reward, rank or salary. After 5 days, I no longer care about honor or disgrace, skill or clumsiness. After 7 days, I become so still that I forget I have 4 limbs or a body. When this happens, for me it is as if the royal court has ceased to exist. My skill is concentrated and the outside world slides away. Then I enter into the mountain forest, viewing the inborn heavenly nature of trees. The Zhuangist exemplars actively abstain from the rigid and flexible attachment to the ambitions, concerns, and preoccupations that obstruct. See, I'm preoccupied right there with that. And there was a typo above to it. It said like an of was next to like an of the or something. I'm not much of a sage. To the ambitions, concerns, and preoccupations that obstruct experience of things as they are. Having thus fasted, a sage is free to roam, escaping from the confinement of a single way that characterizes other creatures. While fish come together in water, to which their movement and awareness is confined, humans alone come together in the way. The true person, at least when roaming, conceives of the world as a whole, of the many particular ways given by the way, which in turn can enable an awareness of the way. By considering the notions of wandering and fasting, that process of emulating Tao is located within the wider structure of activities and metaphors offered by the Zhuangzi. Such resonances confirm that the parallels are tracking deeper features of the vision of genuine or true human life that follows the way of heaven. The Zhuangist virtues of spontaneity, impartiality, and expansiveness are modeled on the Tao, which is why true virtuosity resides in the heavenly. But such true persons are very rare, partly because cosmic emulation is extremely difficult, partly because of the corrupting effects of human life. Zhuangzi's attacks on Confucians, Mohists, and others reflect his alarm at their promotion of forms of artifice, such as morality, rights, and learning that distort or destroy our capacities for spontaneity, natural ways of living. By fasting and wandering, a person slowly abandons these forms of artifice, thus becoming able to emulate the Tao and so to wander in the heavenly. This is made possible through the rich array of metaphor, emulative practices, and illustrative accounts of Zen-ren offered throughout the Zhuangzi. Okay. So, I mean, again, I don't really have much to say about this. I'm not a scholar of Chinese philosophy. But, I mean, as I said earlier, it just seems like Tao is a good excuse to put all these things they really like together, and attributing it to the cosmos or whatever doesn't really matter to me where it gets attributed. This is the philosophy and this is how they're organizing it. It's organized in this concept of Tao and this is how it's organized. I'm not actually sold on that this is necessarily out in the world or where it is. I don't know if that, like, to me that question doesn't really mean anything. This is just how they're organizing their philosophy. And if you want to call that a natural organization, that's fine. But why is that cosmic as opposed to some other sort of understanding? I don't know. Okay, so we're going to get to the heavenly now, which is nice. The cosmic emulationist reading of the Zhuangzi can gather together the various rhetorics and metaphors used by scholars of Daoism to articulate the relation of the sage to Tao and show their underlying unity. When striving to attain harmony in life, writes Olivia Cohn, the sage will flow along smoothly with the course of Tao, while, as Brian Van Norden explains, the ultimate goal for a Taoist is to model oneself on the way by engaging in non-action in one's everyday activities. David L. Hall and Roger T. Ames refer variously to analogs, correlation, and continuity between the sage and the Tao, at one point using the term emulate, albeit only of the patterned natural processes within the natural world, citing chapter 25 of the Tao Te Ching. Indeed, Ames is notable for the use of the term emulate, for instance when explaining the Taoist conception of human consummation as requiring one to emulate the natural Tao, thereby achieving integration, and ultimate identity with it. Continuing this theme, Ames argues that what is distinctive to Daoism is an insistence that models of human excellence be opened up to the cosmic order from the emulation of only human exemplars to the emulation of the natural order broadly, of the orderly, elegant, and harmonious processes of nature. See, here's what do you mean exactly? Yeah, see, here's my same complaint. What exactly is meant by nature here, as opposed to Tao, as opposed to some sort of ideal, which we might say in the West? Not sure. I mean, it's mostly my ignorance of this area of philosophy, but and there's no real criticism here. It's just sort of how my only real criticism would be a worry that we're imposing some sort of or at least I'm imposing some sort of Western conception of nature where it doesn't actually exist on in this philosophy. So that'd be my worry about how I'm reading this stuff. Throughout the philosophical Taoist corpus, there is a grand analogy established in the shared vocabulary used to describe the conduct of the achieved human being on the one hand, and the harmony achieved in the mutual accommodations of natural phenomena on the other. If my account is correct, yeah. So like the accommodation of natural phenomena, would this be like some sort of balance in nature, some sort of like evolutionary balance almost? Don't know. And is that idealistic too, that there is any sort of balance? If my account is correct, the relation is fundamentally emulative, not analogical, and directed not. Well, let me say that again. If my account is correct, the relation is fundamentally emulative, not analogical and directed not at natural phenomena processes, but rather at their source, Tao. No doubt this is one reason that Taoists employ distinctive types of practice, such as wandering and fasting, rather than those more familiar in Aristotelian virtue theories. Yeah, so now I can't even say Aristotle. Underlying the rhetorics and metaphors of harmony, integration, correlation is the concept of cosmic emulation. What makes that term preferable is that needs to be gone, is that it captures the direct and intimate character of the sage's relation to that source, to Tao. Ultimately, what is exemplary about Zen Ren is not their stillness, equanimity, bodily vitality, admirable as these surely are. Instead, the exemplarity consists of their success in the profound task of emulating Tao, of becoming a true person by following the way of heaven. Yeah, see, the way of heaven is based in nature, but heaven's not in nature, so like that's I'm not sure what they mean by heaven in that case either. And this, again, my fault, not author's fault, because this stuff is surely standard fare for this area. This is a distinctive form of exemplarism, differing from Zagzebski in two respects. The first is that the ultimate object of emulation is not a human person, but the cosmos, the ground or source of the world. The second is that the Zhuangzi rejects the claim that genuine exemplarity requires that one has a reflective relationship with one's moral convictions and an inheritance from Aristotelian virtue theory. Taoists reject the idea that being a true, genuine human being requires a sophisticated cognitive attainment. Most of the Zen Ren are uneducated people without intellectual abilities or inclinations, but this does not damage their status as exemplars of life on the way. Insisting that exemplarity needs a reflective component establishes a bias against goodness, confining true day to those intellectually able and disposed. Intellectual bias here. Those intellectually able and disposed. Moreover, there are, Illuminati. Moreover, there are warnings in the text against developing or indulging an intellectually scholarly stance on virtue and Tao, usually expressed in the hostility to learning, theory, and scholarship. In Zhuangzi, the main objective is that theoretical impulses reflect and reinforce invidious zeal for cleverness, wisdom, and theoretical understanding that distort or obstruct our unforced spontaneity. By a fasting of the heart-mind, these impulses can be stilled so that they no longer block the course. I mean, this is not like a Luddite philosophy. You're not trying to say you don't learn stuff, but it's the I can appreciate the especially in philosophy, you get some invidious zeal for being clever. This happens quite a bit, and so that is to be avoided. you do get some people trying to just show off how clever they are all the time, and you're just like, go away, I don't care how clever you are. The Zhuangist sages do, however, invite a more substantive challenge. Oh, to be fair to those people, as soon as you just say, oh my god, you're so clever, they get much happier and they're easier to deal with. So just tell them that, and it solves a lot of problems. And then you can get rid of them much faster. The Zhuangist sages do, however, invite a more substantive challenge to their preferred status as exemplars of a truly human life. Typically, the perception of Daoism tends toward romantic visions of cheerful sages wandering barefoot and singing along the riverbanks, free from the stuffy formality of Confucian consummate persons. Although this image is both attractive and entrenched, the overall vision of human life in the Zhuangzi is arguably much bleaker. A misanthropic vision of dark despair, pitiless and chilling in its depiction of the misery and sad delusion of typical human life. Yikes, that went dark fast. In the words of Eskimo Mulgard, lacking the way, human beings are confined by artificial pressures, fluxing unstably from worried to sad, alienated and confused as their life rushes on like a galloping horse. Such failures are, moreover, peculiar to human beings. Only we can forget or lose the way, for as A.C. Graham puts it, while all other things move spontaneously on the course proper to them, only man has stunted and maimed his spontaneous aptitude. That's funny. Although the lives of those who have lost or forgotten the way are depressing, one should demur before endorsing wholeheartedly the lives of Zen Ren. During the classical period, Confucians criticized the Taoist vision of life attuned to the Tao for derogating or marginalizing certain essential dimensions of human existence. An important statement of this critique was Shunzi's protest that Zhuangzi was blinded by nature and insensible to men, forsaking the rituals, conventions, and other forms of artifice integral to the attainment of a consummate human life. Modern critics also share the worry that Zhuangzi tends, as Eric S. Nelson remarks, to ignore the properly human and ethical in upholding the supremacy of an indifferent, impersonal, and fatalistic Tao. The worry may seem confirmed by declarations like forgetting the human makes you a man of the heavenly, a state attained when one finally forgets about all human viewpoints. The charge of inhumanity against Taoist exemplarity may seem inevitably amplified by the concept of cosmic emulation. Taking Tao as a model of exemplary life may provide an insufficiently rich basis for a truly human existence, such that attempting to emulate Tao risks atrophying certain integral components of a human existence, the forms of artifice celebrated by Confucians, such as cultured learning and worldly ambition. In terms of Zagzebski's account, the Zhuangist exemplars may invite admiration, but also many other affective responses, including alarm, curiosity, disquiet, and even horror. When Zhuangzi's wife died, a friend went to comfort him, only to find the sage singing loudly and banging on his drum. Without rushing into judgment about the meaning of this episode, it does underscore the complexity of the Zhuangist exemplars as intelligible models of an authentically human life. Well, it always does seem that the people who have a party when someone dies are having a much better time than just the morose folks. It's yeah, you can be sad for a bit, but even the ones that get together and have celebrate the life do seem to be having a much better time than the ones just tearing their hair out. Emulating, that's just my opinion. You should take it with a grain of salt. Emulating Tao may be a way of life that is true and genuine, but perhaps is also intolerably insensible, as Shunzi warned, to what belongs to humanity. Yeah. Engaging with the charge of inhumanity will be a crucial task for those who wish to defend the ideal of cosmic emulation. Without taking sides, one should certainly avoid the hasty assumption that cosmic emulation must confirm or amplify the charge. These Zen Ren in the text are, after all, engaged in human activities such as swimming and carving, and at least some of them, such as Yellow Emperor, were actively involved in social life, unlike the spare sages of the Daoism, who do not reveal or manifest themselves. There is no rejection of human life to core, despite those popular images of Taoist sages dwelling far away in the mountains, away from the cities. Moreover, though one can easily find remarks to confirm the charge of inhumanity, other sections of the Zhuangzi emphasize the reciprocity and mutual harmonization of the human and the heavenly. This paper is starting to remind me of the paper by Boomer Trujillo on Cynics and Friendship, which I reviewed not too long ago, where the cynics were like, people would be like, you're nuts, you cynics, you're crazy, what are you doing? But they turned out to be like pretty good friends, and like they had they weren't actually that in certain respects in like other human interactions, even though they rejected lots of the the sort of society of the Greeks, they weren't really that crappy people. They were like good friends, and like they'd get married and they'd have relationships. It wasn't that bad. So as always, the caricature is never that as accurate as the reality. Okay, in Chapter 6, The Great Source as Teacher, Zhuangzi remarks that to become a great human being, neither heavenly nor the human win out over the other, as illustrated by the music of the Yellow Emperor, which he himself explains was performed with the human, but attuned to the heavenly. But other remarks go further, affirming that the potentialities that constitute our humanity are only truly realized in the heavenly. Aspiring Zenren should insatiably partake of the heavenly, but not neglect the human, because only the radiance of heaven reveals the humanness of the human. Tao gives all the things their own essential natures, their own ways, and for humans these include the distinctive capacity to understand and so come together in the way. If so, following the way of heaven is the truly human way. As enticing as this may be, the fact remains that the forms of human life manifested by the Zhuangist exemplars are ones that elicit a variety of responses. Zagzebski argues that the admiration is the primary positive emotional response elicited by exemplars, activated by Zenren's joyful pleasure in the lives of fishes and birds or the vibrant spontaneity of their lives. But such admiration sits alongside the other responses, including alarm, reported by Shunzi. At its root, the complexity of our responses to exemplars reflects a deep set of issues, ultimately about the nature of human life, exemplary or otherwise. Sustained reflection on the complex figures presented in the Zhuangzi, not least its titular character, offers us a way to think about historical forms of exemplarity and the nature of humanity by scoping out something of the range of possible forms that authentically human life could take. If so, there is deep value to the study of the cosmic mode of emulation, a project already underway among ancient practitioners and modern scholars of Chinese philosophy. Conclusion. There is a cosmic mode of emulation present within Zhuangist Daoism, focused not on any human person but on the ground or source of the world. Certain persons are exemplary for manifesting, within their conduct and character, qualities or features of the cosmos, at least as they are conceived with the terms of their respective traditions. Such cosmic emulation typically shows itself in parallels between the virtues of the exemplar and the qualities of the cosmos, a fact that, in the case of Daoism, explains why characterizations of the way are usually given through implicit descriptions of the sage. Moreover, there will also be signs of cosmic emulation within the distinctive practices, metaphors, and other features of those traditions, for instance in emulative practices such as fasting of the heart-mind. As a final thought, there is no reason to suppose that cosmic emulation was confined to ancient philosophical traditions, whether Chinese or not. Taking a wider view, there are promising candidates from, among other times and contexts, a set of fin de siècle. I don't know French, I never got good at it. Whatever that is, European philosophies. To the strategy I've employed earlier, these examples evince telltale parallels between the virtues of a set of exemplars and the qualities or attributes of the ground or source of the world. Nietzsche's later vision is one of the world as will to power, as preeminently manifested within certain types of hero, the overman, free spirit, or philosophers of the future. Such exemplary persons make and create their world, directing their energies to organize and impose their will. In doing so, these Nietzschean exemplars are consciously emulating the unconstrained energy, creativity, and superabundance of the will to power. Hence, they are the true exemplary human beings. A deep reason for hostility to the Judeo-Christian religion, drive materialism, and other of Nietzsche's targets is that they militate against the aspiration to emulate will to power. A closely related candidate is the vitalism espoused by the still neglected earliest 20th century French philosopher Henri Bergson, who envisioned the world as animated by élan vital, a vital force, an energetic, creative, flowing stream of life. Bergson's heroes included include the creative artist whose life consists of creating oneself endlessly, striving to bring forth new forms, such as the artist's inner life emulates the pulsing energy of the elan vital that surges up through and gives shape and vitality to the world. Many other candidates could be offered for investigation, presenting new forms of cosmic emulationism, expressing in varying conceptions of human exemplarity. This would indicate that the cosmic mode of emulation has a longer, deeper presence in the history of philosophy across its major traditions than is currently recognized. Okie doke. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice paper. Of course, it's, focused on Chinese philosophy, which, I have less experience with. I am as I think I've made my points reasonably clear about how I am uncertain of the meaning of like the term nature and external to the human and heavenly. Yeah, so I don't, because a lot of times there's something lost in translation along these things, and so that worries me because I don't know what is sort of like we're emulating in nature. Is this emulating more in like the conceptual realm? And that's fine because either way, the author's point would still hold. It just wouldn't be what I'm thinking of nature. It would just be something else. So the point would still hold. Other than that, the paper's good. I like that I mentioned Nietzsche at one point, and then that gets brought up at the end. Yeah. So that's about it. I don't have a whole lot more to say. It seems like a good paper, and get to learn something about the Dao Zhuang and the Dao and Zhuangzi. So have a good night, folks. I will be back tomorrow morning, and please stay safe out there.